Holy leads to whole. And this is where it starts bringing us into the whole topic of the church. And it starts with just a little bit of a history lesson here, because I find this amazing, especially coming out of the Catholic Church. There is a verse that has been the cornerstone defense of the papal system. And that's fine. I'm not here to argue the papal system. But in the history of things after Luther Reformation, as things go on, one of the first targets of splitting away was to deny the papal system. And so we took this phrase, anyone in a Protestant church took this passage and marginalized it. We maybe went as far as to explain it in such a way that we say, well, that isn't what it meant. But we never really go on to say what it really means, because we want to stay away from that passage. What a big mistake. This was more than just Jesus being clever with words. There is a whole understanding of what the church is in this passage of Jesus. Well, which passage am I talking about? Jesus is talking to Peter and the close disciples around him. And he says this in Matthew 16:18, "And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it." I say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And oh my goodness, all kinds of theological stuff starts getting kicked around. But what was Jesus really saying? Well, he would have been speaking in Aramaic, but those Aramaic speakers put it into ancient Greek. And so when they put it into Greek, they knew they were saying what they meant to say when they put it in there. So we can go there. So what was being said? Well, for someone speaking that ancient language, it was self-evident. It's we who tend to have a problem with it. He told Peter, you are Peter, Petros. Petros. And now, here's, if you were wondering, here's my rock I brought in. And I want you to think of this rock as being 100 times the size, big enough to build a house on or something. And this is how the mental picture that was being built up. He said to Peter, you are my Petros. Petros does not mean boulder. It does not mean stone. It means a piece of rock. It means kind of, in effect, to chip off the old block is really what it means. And a whole theology builds from this mental concept. You see, well, what does it mean to be a piece of the rock? Well, first, what is the second word? He said, on this rock I will build my church. He used another word. It wasn't Petros, it was Petra, which does not mean a piece of rock. It means a bedrock. And that's why I said, think of this as a giant rock. Bedrock. You go out and you want to dig your garden and you hit those stones and you go, oh man, I just hit bedrock. I can't put my garden here. Bedrock. So we're talking Petros, Petra. Peter, you are this. Well, what are you, Peter? Well, one thing, I am the exact substance of this. If you wanted to know the molecular structure or anything about this, all you would need is this will tell you all about this. It's the same substance. And there's a second thing that happens with this. See, I couldn't find my stone chisel, but the screwdriver worked pretty good anyway. And I chipped it in, and this rock piece broke off. And every angle, every part of this is made now to fit exactly into the bedrock. It's not by accident. It has a place it belongs. It is formed to fit in that place. So we know two things about Peter now. One is he is the same substance as the bedrock, and he's designed to fit in a certain place in the bedrock. And this is bringing us to what the church really is. What does it mean in all of this principle? It means that to be a part of the church, well, let's just back up a bit and say, well, then what's the bedrock? And I asked them that in the first thing, and a lot of good answers. They said, it's the Word of God, it's the gospel. Okay, I'll go with that. If we're talking the Logos, the living Word, who turns out to be Christ. So the bedrock is the Logos, or the argument of God. It is also Christ himself. The bedrock is all of these things. It is God incarnate. It is all of these things, and as we learn on later on, it is also the church. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's all of these things. Wow, look what is starting to set up here. This piece of rock is a piece of that rock because it's the same substance and fits exactly in it. It came from there. It is by nature the same as the bedrock. Wow, what does that mean then to be part of the church? And understand that this is when God says the church, that even hell can't prevail against it, even the grave can't prevail against it. He's not just talking church, he's talking this church. He's talking this bedrock. He's talking about the Petros who can fit into this rock. He's talking this. And that brings up a point with this, is that then the case is, to be part of this church, all of us must be a Petros. Not just the guy named Peter, all of us must be a Petros. We must be of the same substance as God himself, fitting where God designed. That is what the church is. Ephesians 1:22 says, "And he put all things under his feet and gave him to be head over all things to the church, which in his body the fullness of him fills in all. The fullness of him. That kind of fits the analogy. See, this rock is the fullness of the bedrock. It's exactly everything this is. It's just not the whole thing. It's just a piece. But it is in every respect the same nature. You know, when I took this rock out, it had dirt ground all around it and everything. And Kathy was saying, "What in the world are you doing down in the basement?" I had this thing in the sink, and I was clanging around and scrubbing it and everything. She said, "What in the earth, what were you doing?" Well, what I was doing was actually kind of a godly thing in a way, is I had this, and I was removing from the bedrock what was on it, but it wasn't the bedrock. It was just dirt. It was just dirt attached. And there's a lot of people who will think they are part of the church, who they're on the church, they're clinging to the church, but they're really not part of the church because they're not the same nature as the bedrock. That's the number one qualification, is to be part of the a chip off the old block.